Test. Testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 3. Test 1 2 1 2 3. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're coming in the world from. I'm really glad you're here with me today. And today is I just decided I'm going to do a live stream, and we're streaming concurrently right now to LinkedIn and to YouTube. So depending on which platform you're on, I'd love you to just make a comment in the notes. Right now, the comments that come in from LinkedIn aren't actually getting to me. So I actually have another. I got my laptop over here in my studio here, and if you choose to say hello or make a comment, I can see it on a laptop, but it's not on my main screen. So if I'm looking over to the side, that's probably what I'm trying to do, is to see if anybody on LinkedIn. It looks like we've got some people on board already. And if you're on YouTube and you make comments in the live stream chat, just say hello in the live stream, and I can see your comments right here on the screen in front of me. So today we're going to do some cool stuff. And it's really a process I've been doing over the last number of years. We're going to talk about some cool stuff, but over the last 20 years, I've been a coach and a CEO coach, owner operator coach. I've worked with both startup founders all the way to CEOs of relatively large companies. And in that whole entire mix, one of the things I've discovered is there is these two terms, or sometimes three terms, that are kind of interchangeable. One is entrepreneur, one is founder, owner operator, and then CEO. And it's really interesting because CEO in many cases is a formal title that in at least the US, Canada, and In Europe, it tends to be managing director. But that role and that function is a legal function. And so it's part of the paperwork of the business. It's part of the legal documentation of the business, part of what you deal with your taxes and those kind of things on. So that chief executive officer, president, those kind of things are formal titles. And so a lot of times those names interchangeably are mixed: founder, CEO, owner, operator, CEO, entrepreneur, CEO, and they're all interchanged. But today I want to talk about transitions that we make between being a founder in terms of our actions, the way we think, the way we act, the way we operate, into a CEO, the way a CEO acts, thinks, operates. So it's not about the title per se, it's about the function. It's about the way we operate. It's about the way we think. And over the last 20 years, I have seen and experienced a lot of different people, a lot of different situations, a lot of different people in all those growth phases, moving from startup, right when they begin their business. And I actually coach a number of startups, a couple in this SaaS space right now, and right through to CEOs of large. I've never worked with a publicly traded company, but I've worked with large private companies. And so to see that whole range and how leaders lead in those different functions is really important. Related, executives, I think in many organizations, have to think about the same kind of things. So if you're a senior manager, if you're an executive, if you're a senior vice president, if you're a chief operating officer, one of those kind of titles as well, what we're going to talk about today is a really important thing. So initially, it's recognizing that I'm not talking so much about the title you give yourself. I'm talking about the functional role you play related to those titles and names. And today I want to talk about the three major transitions that I have experienced, that I've seen, that I've observed, that I've worked with clients on, in terms of moving from a founder, a owner operator, a entrepreneur, to being a CEO in terms of function, the way you think, the way you operate. And for the sake of fun, I'm actually going to share my little iPad here, because I've been drawing and I'm learning to do some drawing, and I realize this might be a little bit messy. I've drawn some in advance. I'm probably going to draw as we go along. But first and foremost, there's these transitions that need to happen. In terms of moving ourselves from that function of a founder to the function of a CEO. And we're going to go through these, but let me first explain or tell you about this. So I read a quote a while back by Richard Branson. I believe it's from Richard Branson. I'm not completely sure, but he said this, and I've known it to be true as well, which is, I've rarely met an entrepreneur or I've rarely met entrepreneurs who are fit to be CEOs of the companies they start. And it's a really interesting perspective. And this is somebody who started as a founder and moved to become CEO of multiple companies. But the reason I think he says that, and the reason I think he made that statement, isn't that a great picture of Richard Branson? I was going to try and draw a balloon and a plane and different things like that, and maybe a spaceship. I don't know. He's doing all kinds of interesting things. But the reason I think he said this is this, because, and I've drawn this here in kind of a haphazard way. You'll see at the bottom of the screen here. Hopefully you can see that. So the concept here is, a founder acts in certain ways, a owner-operator acts in certain ways, and they have a set of actions that are comfortable to them, that are actually important and were important in starting the business and in growing the business earlier on, and then starting to really see the increase of the business. But what's really interesting, and I've noticed this over the years, is that this growth begins to happen, and then it hits kind of a peak. And it's it's a peak in which I find that a owner operator, a founder, actually their actions now become actually detrimental to future growth, right? So the thing that got them to here is not the thing that's going to take them to the next place. It's almost like all of the capabilities, all of the actions, all of the ways of thinking to get to this point now become actually detrimental to the future growth of the company. And so as a result, I think that's why Richard Branson said it's really hard for entrepreneurs who to actually become CEOs of their company. And so I think he says that, but I think it implies that people like you who are watching don't have the skill set to actually adjust the way you do this, to adjust the way you think, to transition from founder thinking to CEO thinking, from startup person who builds a company to CEO who manages a enterprise. And this doesn't have to be, you don't have to go make a public company to be a CEO in this regard. It just means there's transitions you make so that when you hit this spot, where the actions you keep taking keep stopping you, keep limiting you, keep sort of forming a natural ceiling to your growth because the actions you take just naturally keep you stuck. Then you want to engage in some transitions. So what I want to do is talk about these transitions. I want to talk about the what I believe are three important transitions. Are there more? 100%. There's lots of transitions, but these are three transitions. These are really evident ones that I see, and evident ones that seem to be in place in a lot of companies, a lot of founders that I have worked with over the years. And it's work we do together. It's the kind of conversations we have on a regular basis. But let's work through these transitions. So this is the first one. Flying by sight and transitioning from flying by sight as a founder to flying by instrument as a CEO. So flying by sight, and this is a plane metaphor. This is a pilot metaphor. And so in a single engine plane, even in a double engine plane, if you're flying, I'm not a pilot. My brother's a pilot. I'm not a pilot. I know pilots. But flying by sight is how you learn to fly, right? You learn to fly by sight. You learn to fly by seeing things. And so sight is that thing that allows you to see what's on the horizon, what's happening, what's my altitude, what's my amplitude, what's my flumptitude. I don't know what it is, the tudes you're all doing on an airplane, but you see that, how level am I? Am I going up? Am I going down? I'm seeing all that. I'm aware of that. And that's what entrepreneurs do. Founders and entrepreneurs are exceptionally good at flying by sight, right? You got into this business. You got into the business you're in because you're really good at seeing things. You're really good at looking around corners. You're good at anticipating something that's coming along the path. You're good at sort of knowing, instinctively, that's going to happen and that's going to happen, and this is an opportunity, and I'm gonna actually leverage myself into this opportunity that I see in front of me. And so when you're doing that, you're flying by sight. You're flying with this capability, and I think one of the major, massive benefits of being an entrepreneur is this. Man, you got great eyesight, and like that eyesight sees around corners, and it anticipates things, and it notices things that nobody else notices, and it's why you built a business. It's why you did it. Here's the dilemma, though. As things get more complicated, as things progress, as fog settles in, and one of the conversations I have on a regular basis with my coaching clients is all of the fog around. And I know this because I've read it, I've seen it, is that you can be upside down and a few feet from the water in your airplane and believe you're still okay if you're flying by sight. So when you fly by sight, you can be you can feel like in the fog, oh, everything's working. Yeah, I'm okay. I can't quite see the same way I did. But the problem is you're upside down. You're actually close to crashing, and you may crash ultimately if you continue to fly by sight. So it's one of those places that you get in your business evolution that your function as a founder, the thing that you're so good at, now becomes the thing you start to rely on. And as the fog comes down and as the fog gets deeper and the complexity of your business rises, now what happens is you're visually making eye contact with things. So it's all about what do you see. But when you've grown enough that you can't see all the things, then what starts to happen is you get disoriented. You aren't seeing all the things, even though you confidently believe you can. And so it's really important to understand that the transition as you grow your business, there is a significant transition where you stop working from a purely managed by sight perspective and you start working from instruments. And I love this little instrument panel I drew. Isn't that lovely? And there's the altimeter and the quadometer and the obligator and whatever that thing is. That's the one that says, are you level? And that's the pilot handles right there. That's pretty impressive pilot handles, I gotta say. So, but needless to say, pilots who evolve, pilots who get better, learn to fly by instrument. They learn to fly by the data that's coming at them from the dials, the knobs, the indicators on the surface or in their panels. They're watching those kind of things, and they're watching them because they know that they can't see all of the things that are happening. And it becomes even more important, much more important, when you're actually, the fog rolls in your business, when things get complicated, when things get complex, when weird stuff is happening and you're not so sure what to do. What evolved pilots do is keep looking at the instruments. 20 years ago, it was over 20 years ago, I was working in Australia. I had been brought to Australia. I did a speaking tour in Australia, and I was actually hired to go out to the outback and work in an Aborigine medical center. And so I flew by a single engine plane, and it was about a 4-hour flight into the outback. And the interesting thing for me was the pilot of this plane. He was flying by sight. Like, I watched him. I sat in the front seat. It was just the two of us on the plane, and we basically flew out to the outback, and we landed on just a patch of ground that looked like, and there was a little shed, like a little garage. But the flight itself, it was really interesting to watch because, of course, I didn't know him when I got into the flight, but 4 hours with me on a flight, I get to know you. And what was interesting is watching as he would fly, he would bank around these big, huge clouds, and these clouds would form, and he'd bank around them. And eventually I started asking him, well, how are you processing this? How are you processing this flight? So you're making these big banks, but how do you know what's going on? And he goes, I'm using both, actually. I'm flying by sight, but I'm relying on data. And that was a particularly interesting one for me because it was a long flight where I was in the co-pilot seat, basically, watching someone who was an adept flyer who understood that underneath the stability that he had in the flight was his instruments, but the capability that he still possessed by watching by sight was really important. So when I think about data, when I think about your ability to not so much give up that historical perspective, but transition yourself to being driven by data, driven by instruments in your business, but leveraging that long-term skill of being able to bank around those large situations became really important. So when I think about that, and a lot of times in the conversations I have, it's, do you know your numbers? And so a lot of times founders tend to look at their bank accounts and they look at their P&Ls on the 5th of every month. But that's okay. It's not a bad thing. Those are basic instruments. That's a basic instrument. But I know as I watch larger companies grow that somebody's every day watching cash flow today. Where's our cash today? Where is what's expected tomorrow? What's expected this week? What's expected next month? So the outlays and the inputs are all being managed, right? So cash in, cash out is being watched. P&Ls are being managed. Yes, those are all good. Balance sheet. We're looking and understanding the balance sheet, both in the rear, but a lot of times balance sheets are a moment in time. P&Ls are from everything up till today. So I think that's one element of understanding your instruments. But the second one are scorecards. And if you know the entrepreneurial operating system, there's a number of different operating systems out there, but the entrepreneurial operating system has a tool in it, and so do the others, called a scorecard. And the scorecard is really a set of leading indicators in your business. So how many leads showed up today? Like if you're relying on say web marketing as a portion of your marketing business, how much traffic came to the site? How many leads showed up today? How many not just leads, but how many proposals went out the door? How many sales conversations did we have? All of these are kind of scorecard items, leading indicators. From an operational perspective, how many activities did we do today? How much, if you're in the service business, how many stops did your technician make today on their route? So there's scorecard items, which I think are leading indicators. While financial metrics are often lagging indicators on your dashboard, scorecard are often leading indicators. What are the things, what are the actions, what are the steps that need to be taken? And if we prove our reliance on those, then we have an idea of what the data is telling us. And then the third one, and I think this one, I realize I can't read it as I look at my screen, but it's really benchmarks. So it's what I tried to say here was us versus others, which is what are our benchmarks? And a lot of times benchmarks are those things that help us to understand the implications of some of the data, whether it be the financial data or the scorecard data that's showing up in our business, as a way to really understand ourselves, to understand what's happening in our business. So when I think about flying by sight versus flying by instrument, a couple of things. So I also happen to own a web business, and in our web business, one of the things I've noticed, I can know my P&L, and I can know my balance sheet, and I can know the financial metrics, and I've got scorecard items, but I am privy to a lot of information just because I've purchased it in terms of what do other marketing agencies make per revenue per person. What's their revenue per person? What's their labor efficiency ratio? What's the salary cap that they have in that business? And I've done videos on a number of those particular items in a more generic way, so you understand what the implication of salary cap is, and labor efficiency ratios, and revenue per employee is a great metric. A metric, if it's just housed in your own business, that's valuable. It's good data, but there's more to it than that. So if you can have comparative data, that can be really helpful. In most industries, there's comparative data, and it's often financial data, but there's stuff there that you can learn. That's stuff there that can be valuable to you. So take advantage of it. So the first transition you can make is to move from flying by sight, which is line of sight. What do I see? What are the problems in front of me? That instinctive ability to react, to moving now to being really data driven. So making decisions first on data, having that baseline comfort level with data in your business, both lagging data, financial stuff, leading data, scorecard stuff, and then comparative data that places it all together and lets you know how you're doing in relationship to other people who look like you or in similar industries to you, is a really helpful way to now give yourself that transition from being a founder who focuses on line of sight to a CEO that sees how to grow this business, how to scale this business, how to move this thing forward based on the underlying principles that come with knowing the data. All right, that's number one. Number two, and this might be really helpful. Rye, I just noticed you posted in LinkedIn, so I'm looking over here. Data allows us to control month-on-month expenses and increases the profitability. Yes, that's another really important part of this. Data allows you to have all of this capability for growth, for scalability. Without that data, you can't scale. You can't scale looking around corners as a CEO. You just can't. Or as a founder, you can't do that. You have to be able to leverage the data that you have to see things. All right, here's the second transition. First one was site to instruments. This one is do it myself versus delegate to others. So the reality is, as a founder, you started by doing it yourself. I mean, if you took widgets and you made them and then you piled them up and then you sold them and you got really good at that. And your ability to do it yourself is really part and parcel of how you built these businesses. And a lot of times, if you go back to Stephen Covey's early work, it was moving from working in the business to on it. But really what's interesting here is so much of that early stuff from Stephen Covey in the E-Myth was, and it wasn't Stephen Covey. Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Michael Gerber wrote E-Myth, E-Myth Revisited. And the interesting thing in E-Myth Revisited is working in the business, working on the business. But what Gerber said in that really, I think, a really good book was most of us as starters of the business are actually good at the thing we do. And so to start the business, we were doing a thing for somebody else, and then we leave them and go start doing the thing for ourselves because we believe we can be better at it. And so in reality, a lot of us started businesses because we could do the thing. And so part of what made us effective as a founder is we did the thing better than other people did the thing, and we were able to sell the thing that we did, and we get better at it. But eventually, every single person I work with gets to a place where there's not enough hours in the day to do the thing that you have to do. And so immediately there's a limit to our growth right there. So doing it myself. So the first action that a lot of founders take is they delegate that process. They delegate that process. And so they find another person to do the thing that we do, the widget thing, the action we take. And so you get and hire somebody, and the actual language that often happens in the conversations I have with people is they need a mini-me, right? They're looking for a mini-me. And so really what they're looking for is someone to take the task that they're doing, right? This task that they're doing, and move that task that they're doing to somebody else. So it's like basically I replicate myself because I just need somebody to do these tasks, and they get one person to do one set of tasks. And a lot of times one of the first things I encourage founders, people who are acting in a founder kind of role, is to actually outsource a lot of the administrivia in their business, like hire somebody to do those tasks. That's part of the process. So get somebody to do the task of administration, because generally speaking, founders aren't good aren't necessarily great at administration. Founders are good at doing the thing we do. But if you get somebody to do the administrative things you do, the trivial stuff that's still important, it's critical to running your business, but it's the stuff that bogs us down, you get that person. So you hire the person to do the administrivia stuff, and then you hire people to do the actions that are piling up on you that seem the most logical next step to take, often operational. But in many of these cases, what we're doing is just delegating the task. We're just saying, take this task that I have and you do the task for me so I'm freed up, right? So I free myself up by delegating the task. The problem with all of this is that it's still just delegation of task. And so ultimately, as the founder, you still stay responsible. So if you're going to make the transition, so this important transition is not just the delegation to others of tasks, and that's the important distinction here. The really important thing that we're doing is, and to really grow our business, is we have to delegate authority and responsibility. That's ultimately the focus that we have to take. If we're going to get beyond our that sort of ceiling of our own capability, which means we can't grow this business any further, the thing we have to get is we can't just delegate tasks, because delegating tasks doesn't allow us to ever get out of owning the tasks. We continually own those tasks. And what we're trying to do, and what we need to do, is now move from delegating tasks to delegating authority, which ultimately means, instead of saying, I've got this task, you do it, we have this function in the business, we have this whole area of the business that I'm delegating to you, and I'm giving you full authority for it, for the function of it, plus the outcomes. Ray Dalio, in his book Principles, great book, by the way, and I'm not sure if he got this original, but he has a whole concept in his book, Principles, called responsible party, which I love. I think it's such a great tool, or it's such a great way of thinking, which is this responsible party. And so what he talks about is, you set up in your business a person who's the responsible party, and this responsible party now has full authority, has full ability to manage the function and the outcomes of the business, and or that particular area of their responsibility. And what I like about that is, now what it does is, as a founder, you get to release. And I think what's really impressive with CEOs in function is they understand that they can't be responsible for every function in the business. They are responsible to ensure that each person who is responsible is doing the tasks together for the ultimate outcome. So from that perspective, I think it's really important for you to think in terms of, where am I holding responsibility and delegating a task, versus where am I giving away responsibility and delegating authority to somebody else for a function in the business. And I think this is a really important distinction. And so a lot of times when in the work I do with, especially people in that early stage, sort of up to 1.5, 2 million, where the owner, operator, founder is so stuck in the doing, is really, we kind of go in stages through delegation of task into delegation of authority, so that other people in the organization are responsible parties. I see this sometimes, like in hiring, for example. So a founder will often want to be the last person that talks to everybody in the hiring process. Doesn't matter where they are in the cycle. It could be a entry level part-time person, but the founder feels the obligation to talk to that person in the hiring process, or be the last stamp of approval. And And that's, I think, one of those places where we ultimately hit our wall, like where we hit the ceiling, where we can't progress any further, because at a certain point in time, it's up to the responsible party, wherever that person's hired, ultimately will be the one who is given authority to decide how they hire, who they hire, what they hire, for what purpose, because they have full authority for that. I realize you might not be able to see this, but let me pull this screen back. As a way to remember this for myself, a former coach of mine sent this to me, and it says, Tom Adams, Chief Don't Do It Myself Officer. And on the other side, what he wrote was, duh. I don't know if you can see that. It's all about repeatable, delegatable systems. I show that to you because I need reminders every day of this, and I keep that on my desk all the time. Thanks to Victor Cheng, who was a longtime coach of mine, who kept saying to me, "Tom, you gotta delegate, you gotta delegate." But the secret sauce of getting beyond myself and not being the block in my business was the ability to actually recognize that it wasn't delegating tasks; it was delegating authority. It was delegating someone to be responsible. In the entrepreneurial operating system, and I know it comes from other places as well, but they have this great line, which is ultimately the only way you're going to elevate yourself is you have to delegate. So really, you have to delegate to elevate. Oh, I need to bring that back so you can actually see what I'm writing here. Delegate to elevate. I wasn't looking at the screen possible. So that's the second one. So the first one was moving from flying by sight to flying by instruments. The second one was moving from, or transitioning from doing it myself to delegating authority and responsibility to people who fully become that responsible party. And then the third transition, and I won't spend a lot of time on this one, is moving from quick reaction to thoughtful action. I find this one is so much a part of a founder way of thinking, and it relates to flying by sight versus flying by instrument, but it's slightly different. So quick reaction is that ability to take something that shows up and make an immediate, create an immediate response. So a quick reaction may be, oh, there's this problem in the facility. And immediately we jump to fix it. We jump to fight it. We do whatever it takes. Like as founders, we're exceptionally good at jumping in. Like I said, I own a web company, and one of the hardest things for me to do and to learn is to get out of dealing with problems. Like, because I'm so good at it. I have spent my life. I'm almost 60, and I've spent what is it now? 60 minus 20. I was like working when I was 15. So I spent this long, and I just got good at fixing problems. But one of the dilemmas is I'm really good at quick reaction stuff. But where I've had to learn to move is into thoughtful action. So is to sort of pull back on my ability to react quickly and move into a process of thinking through processes. And I think this comes from sort of evolutionarily, I guess, is we're all born to be ready for the lion around the corner. And so we have that instinct in us as founders that we go, oh, what's going to hit us? What's coming around the corner? I got to be ready for it. I got to deal with it. I got to be anxious, right? So entrepreneurs and many of my clients who are entrepreneurs have sleepless nights. Why? They're going, what about this? And how about this? And how am I going to deal with this? And what am I going to do here? Right? All this reactionary stuff that's happening. It causes us to be really good at building our business to a certain level. And so we're because we've always been looking for the lion around the corner, and the lion that we've protected our businesses from for years has saved our bacon in many ways. Like we've avoided the lion, or else we probably wouldn't be in business. And so we've gotten so good at that we spend a lot of our time in reaction mode. So this happens, I respond. We fix it, we fire it, we fight it, we free it. We do all kinds of things to respond to the obstacles, the challenges, the problems that show up in front of us. Quick reaction But here's the dilemma. So I think we're good at that, but I think the other side of that equation is not only are we good at fighting the lion that shows up, the other part of it is we become very good as well at quick reaction to the new and different. And one of I think it's actually a worse problem. The worst problem that I see for founders who sort of are trying to evolve themselves up to become a CEO, where they get stuck, is they can't release from the quick reaction thinking. And so the quick reaction thinking helps them in problems, but it also gets them stuck because quick reaction happens because we see shiny objects all the time. And one of the things I say to my clients a lot of times is you have to have a boundary structure built around you so that these new and different ideas that show up in response to opportunities, in response to new ventures, in response to new ways of doing things, in response to all this kind of stuff, those actually become a hindrance to you over time. But we're really good at it, so we like it. We go, oh, there's a new way to do marketing, and we change our marketing. Oh, and I like these things on my website. So from one day to the next, we've gone from no chat box to a chat box because we heard it at a Chamber of Commerce meeting. And all of a sudden there's a chat box on your website. The problem we haven't thought about, we reacted quickly. We went, oh, somebody makes $1 million because they got a chat bot on their site. But what we didn't do was think through the implications of that. We didn't have a thoughtful dialogue with ourselves. So we go and grab all of these shiny objects. We change the way we do business. We do all these kind of things because we hear them and because we're geared that way. But I'm telling you, all of that stuff keeps hitting you onto the ceiling of your growth cycle and your growth capability. So new and different and is in the transition you have to make is towards thoughtful planning, right? So part of this process I find for yourself is as a CEO, you rein in that immediate reaction approach. You rein in that tendency to react quickly to things, and you sit back and you take thoughtful action. And thoughtful action often is processed through some kind of formal plan. That formal plan often has where are we now? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? What are the steps, processes, and procedures to get there? What are the financial implications? We go back to look at our instruments. What's the data we need? We go back and we build in for ourselves who's going to be the authority for this? Who's the responsible party? How are we going to implement that? We get thoughtful advice from mentors, advisors, colleagues, team executives in our own organizations, right? So we build this plan. And so that's how, as a CEO, that's how a CEO thinks. The problem is that you can kind of get yourself stuck because you might think you have a plan, right? Over here, you got this plan over here, but then you're stuck in this new and different and fighting lions all the time. And so what you create, and this is the thing that I see most often, is that founders create chaos because of their quick reaction. Because they're all about quick reaction, chaos ensues. And so this chaos just keeps coming. Why? Because there seems to be some logic in where you're going, and you go to a conference and you come back and your team goes, oh no, what's happening today? So CEO or founder comes back and the whole world changes. CEO goes to a conference, comes back and says nothing. Why? Because for the next 6 months, CEO goes into a planning process, thinking process. What are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with that? Earlier this week, I had a conversation with a client, and they were at an event, and they come back from the event, and they got an idea, right? So that rapid reaction capability showed up. But what happened is, this is a CEO. This CEO goes, okay, so now let's process that through my finance department. Let's process that through my ops manager. Let's process this through modeling out of the financial implications of this. And that whole process now allows them to have a really clean, clear understanding of where this is going so they can create a plan that isn't going to be implemented tomorrow. They don't see that as potentially happening till 2024. And so why I'm telling you this is because you can't scale chaos. Chaos will always reach its limit. And so a lot of times as a founder, if you live in this sort of chaos mentality, and it doesn't look like chaos to you, it's just how you live, right? Oh, cool idea. Problem, solve it. New idea about doing something with our business, implement it. That all feels to you like normal, but you can't scale that because it's not built into a thoughtful plan using your understanding of delegation and instruments effectively. So, this today was all about making sure you process these transitions. You process these transitions so that you move from being a founder, owner, operator into being the CEO in a functional way in your business. And so if just these three, if you can actually work on these three in the next couple of weeks. So the first one is when you see something in your business, when you see something in the way things are operating, can you, instead of can you actually go, where do the instruments suggest something about what I just saw? So is there something wrong with the system? Is there something wrong with our training? Is there something wrong with our processes? Is there something wrong with the way we're doing things that caused that thing I see to show up? Versus going into quick reaction mode to solve it in the moment, right? So initially, the transition is, am I flying by sight versus flying by instruments? Second one is, am I delegating tasks or am I delegating authority? Am I delegating tasks or am I delegating authority? And just ask yourself that. Just sort of look at yourself and go, hold the mirror up and go, okay, did I delegate a task there, or am I ultimately figuring out how to delegate authority? And if I can't delegate authority, then is there something in the systems, in the plan, in the process that I need to develop, engage, move forward through, put into my Q1, Q2 planning, make that a strategic priority going forward? That's what I got to work on. So that's the second one. And the third one, again, is can I slow my reaction time down? So every time something occurs, whether it be a problem, a predicament, pain, struggle, issue, can I slow myself down and go, what's the thoughtful action here? I'm really good at the fast action. I'm just not great at the slow, thoughtful, deliberate action. And so when you do those kind of things, when you start to make those three transitions, one of the things that starts to happen is this growth cycle here starts going from a limit to actually just a bump in the road, and then freedom to keep growing. Now, as you think about that, that doesn't mean it's going to be this smooth a line all the time. It's just fundamentally not that way. But the question I have for you today is this: are you willing to work to become the CEO your company, the one you founded, the one you built, the one you grew, needs? Are you willing to do that kind of work? Are you willing to work through flying by instruments, delegating authority and responsibility, and being engaged in thoughtful action on a regular basis? That's what I want for you. I want you to make those transitions into the function of an executive instead of the function of a founder. You need both. Your capabilities as a founder really was the thing that got you to where you are. I do not underestimate that. I love that. That's why I love entrepreneurs so much, is we do really great things. We make really cool things happen. And as a result, I think you have this really cool opportunity as you're in your business. I want to say, if you're watching and you don't own your own business, you're not the founder, but you're involved in it. Watch how these things step into your world. I notice in some of my clients, as they grow, the next tier, like the senior management tier, gets stuck with the same thing. So the founder learns to delegate authority and responsibility to the responsible party in, say, sales, marketing, ops, finance, administration, any of those kind of categories. But what happens is someone in that line of the business actually starts to hold on to it, right? And they become the task owner instead of the delegator of authority. They start to fly by, they're flying by sight and not by instruments. They're actually engaged in quick reaction versus thoughtful action. And so it happens throughout the organization. Today, I'm talking predominantly to founders who want to become more functional as a CEO so they can scale their business, they can grow their businesses in a significant way. But at a certain point in time, it starts moving down the ladder. So there you have it. Really glad that you joined me for this. We had a great deal of time together. Thanks for spending it with me. I hope that this is helpful. I hope you learned something, and I hope with what you learned, you can do something with this. So that's it for me. Thanks for joining. Thanks for, I've checked LinkedIn a couple of times and noticed that a couple of people have been with us. And so thank you. Thank you for a comment. And for those of you on YouTube, thanks for joining us. And again, I'm going to do this more often. I plan on doing this on a regular basis, having these live streams. And so I'm going to invite you to join the journey with me. I love doing this kind of stuff. I love teaching, helping you think through stuff. And so we'll do this on a regular basis. So thanks for joining us. Have a great one. And we'll talk to you again. See ya. Bye.